Hello, folks. Today we have a special guest, a lady who wears many hats, or in this case, many veils. She is a YouTuber, a singer in the goth community, the one, the only, the goddess of the glass herself, Adrienne LaVey. Hello, welcome.
Hi. So happy to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, thank you for being my first my first interview. I'm kind of new to this. I didn't study much of it or do much research. That's how I roll. I just trial and error until I get something going, some kind of system.
That's okay.
But before we get started, how would you like to share what you are drinking there?
So today we are drinking Jade Terminus Oxygenate. This is my favorite absinthe that I have ever had out of the over 50 that I have reviewed. And this is actually the absinthe that inspired my song, Goddess in a Glass, that is coming out on National Absinthe Day, which is March 5th.
Hell yeah. We will be getting to that song pretty soon, but let's start at the beginning. Let's start at your origin story.
Okay.
What came first, Adrienne, the goth or the singer?
I think it's pretty clear that the singer definitely came first. And the reason I say that is because I was probably like a really, really wee one at like 4 years old when I first saw like Amadeus for the first time with my mom. Now, mind you, I hate Mozart, but I do love the movie. I do love the movie Amadeus because I do like the rivalry and like the analysis of classical music and the drama that goes into it. So it is one of my favorite movies ever, but I hate Mozart. So noted for the record. But ever since I saw like that first scene where Salieri is reminiscing on him conducting his opera and that opera singer's descending the stairway, I was just like, whoa, I want to be what she is. And that was kind of the catalyst for what told me I wanted to be a singer. And then as I got a little older, I started listening more to Queen. And I always joke around to my friends and acquaintances that Queen was my gateway drug to opera.
Well, that is a good way to start because that is one operatic voice right there. So would you say like Freddie Mercury was like the first tunes you were picking up when you were younger?
Yeah, I would say so. That was probably one of the first operatic voices that I picked up on when I was in my formative years, which are very, very, very important years to have.
Yeah. I mean, I think like most kids, I was singing along to whatever I heard. I can sing a little bit, but definitely not at your level. But I'm thinking of like the first songs I was singing, and I can't believe I'm admitting this, but when it comes to, first recollection, American Tail, songs from that movie.
Okay.
And since I'm already embarrassing myself, like probably my first public performance as a singer was when I got lost in the grocery store around 4 years old. I started singing right there, somewhere out there because I was lost.
That's hilarious.
My mom finally found me, and I swear she had the perfect combination of amused and ready to kill me painted on her face.
Oh, that's so funny.
Yeah. And that's when I realized I probably wasn't meant for singing.
That's okay. It's not for everyone.
No, but Amadeus, I saw that also at a very young age. And I remember watching that and years later watching Animal House and seeing that. I was like, oh my God, it's Mozart.
Yep, it's Wolfie.
I think I'm going to like them a little better in Animal House. He was kind of
I think so too. He was such a dick in Amadeus, which, the historical Mozart was in fact a dick.
Yes.
One of the reasons why I don't like him.
Yeah. But one thing I realized is when it comes to creative people, some like the most creative and influential minds were the most flawed.
Mm-hmm.
Like
definitely true.
That's how they worked out whatever demons they were going through. Not all of them. And sometimes you had assholes who weren't even talented. It's the way it went. But I'm trying to think of like the music industry has always been cutthroat. Even from my perspective, just knowing musicians and artists have to deal with it. I can't imagine what it was like back in those days.
Oh boy. Probably a nightmare.
Probably literally cutthroat.
Yeah, probably was.
So, got you singing. Now, what was your gateway into goth music?
So my gateway into goth music was it was really funny. I started kind of showing gothic tendencies when I was in my I think I want to say I was like 9 or 10 years old, and then someone asked me, "Are you gothic?" And I'm like, "What does that mean?" They're just like, "I don't know." But of course, the intrepid young Adrienne was definitely predisposed to looking things up when she was curious about them. So I looked it up and found out, wow, there's an entire subculture based on a whole bunch of creepy shit that I love. And that's how I found goth. That's how I eventually found the music. And I was into the classic, like 80s bands for a while, but then they just kind of lost their spark for me. And I eventually discovered bands like Nox Arcana and Dead Can Dance and Dark Sanctuary, and that definitely like lured me in a few years later to find like the 90s goth rock bands that I ended up falling in love with.
Nice. You mentioned people saying that were calling you gothic. What was it about? Like, did you have like just a morbid sense of humor, wearing all black?
I had a morbid sense of humor. I was into the creepy things. I was starting to dress in darker colors, and then I was pretty much obsessed with the original Dark Shadows series when I was growing up. So that definitely came through in my personality a lot.
I remember you mentioned that when we first met, and that was one of the things that caught on. Because, like, as a kid, I watched that too. It was on PBS. It was like Dark Shadows. I remember Twilight Zone and like old Doctor Who episodes late at night on the weekends. But I was always watching those, and that was a great show.
Yeah, it was a great show. Kenny is still in the midst of watching it with me. And I think we're about like maybe half or maybe 2/3 of the way through.
It's a commitment.
It is a commitment, yes. We've been watching it the entire time we've been together, so yeah, we're still getting through it, and there are parts that he enjoys, but other times he's just like, "What the fuck?"
Well, yeah, like any soap opera.
Yeah, that's just how it goes. Comes with the territory.
Right. You know, you mentioned like your gateway. For me, typo negative. I was a metalhead before I got into goth music, and also that sounds a lot less cliche than Manson and Nine Inch Nails.
Oh yes.
But I didn't really get into like the post punk stuff until afterwards. Like my first intro were bands like Kill Hannah, Faith in the Muse, Switchblade Symphony, you know, Nosferatu, London After Midnight. You know, then of course, being in Chicago, Wax Trax, the industrial right in my face.
Oh yes.
All right, so you're in the goth scene. What was Baby Bat Adrienne like?
Baby Bat Adrienne was pretty solitary. I did keep to myself a lot. I had one best friend consistently growing up, and she and I were both into goth, and we kind of would spend time with each other watching classic horror movies and listening to new goth bands that we would discover, that sort of thing. And that's what I was into. And every now and then I would shuffle some classical music into the goth music that I was listening to. And my interest in classical music was maintained, but I didn't really get a real spark for it until I hit about 15 years old, when I had my first voice lesson with a friend of a family member of mine, who was a very seasoned voice coach. And she introduced me to my favorite composer, and I've been head over heels in love with opera ever since.
And that composer is?
And that composer is Gaetano Donizetti, and I actually have his signature tattooed on me.
Really?
I do. His signature, along with some other motifs that I associate with him, but yeah, like, he definitely touched me on a really deep level. And I have that tattooed on my right thigh.
He signed your right thigh, or he just had a signature tattooed there?
Just a signature tattooed there because he's long dead.
All right. Well, I'm not familiar. I know the name, but I'm not familiar with it. You know, where his era.
I don't know if the camera's going to catch that. Probably not.
It's bright light.
Oh, bummer. Oh well.
It's all good.
I was hoping it would catch that, but it didn't. That's okay.
Well, when I post this, do you want me to post a picture of it?
Yeah, sure, absolutely.
All right, cool. Well, I mean, whether or not I omit that part, we'll see.
Yeah, we'll see.
Let's see how the flow of the chat goes.
But ever since I heard Amore e Morte by Gaetano Donizetti when I was taking my first couple of voice lessons as a 15-year-old. I was just like, oh my God, what is this? How have I not heard of Donizetti before? And then I was kind of thinking about it and thinking about it. And I'm just like, oh, yeah, it's because everyone is tripping over their dicks, chasing after Mozart and acting like he's the Rolls Royce of classical music, when there is so many more composers out there in the classical repertoire that are so much better than Mozart and don't get enough attention. And I would consider Donizetti to be one of those composers that is criminally overlooked.
Yes, and that happens very often. But for the more normies out there, myself included, would you like to tell us about this gentleman?
Yes. Actually, I'm going to bring you guys a little motif of him that I think you'll appreciate. Kenny actually got it for me as an early Valentine's Day gift. I will be right back.
Right on, Kenny.
Not done yet. I am grabbing my Donizetti bust. Yeah, that's right.
Was he waiting outside the door? Is he done yet? What did he say?
Okay, let's see. So let's wait for the camera to figure out what's going on here. There we go.
Adjust. Try moving it closer.
There we go.
Oh, that's so cool.
There he is. You can see him now. Very distinguished gentleman. He was very handsome. So he is considered to be one of the pioneering composers of the bel canto movement of classical music.
Which is?
So when you translate that, it literally means beautiful singing. And the reason why it's called the bel canto is because this movement of classical music and of opera is considered to be one that was mostly focused on bringing out the best qualities of the voice and showing off the versatility of the voice and showing off the ability of the voice, the best color in the voice, instead of just writing whatever the fuck the composer wanted. The composers of the bel canto wanted to bring out the best qualities in the singer's voice. So that's what was all about, and it was awesome.
Well, I always thought that's just one of the pitfalls of creativity, especially group creativity, because you have art, which is so fluid and malleable, but you got somebody with their vision, they want it done right. Otherwise, it's going to deviate and not be what it is. And you got to find that balance. And
yeah.
I'm for the first time now, I'm working with another writer on a project. Otherwise, I always been doing it myself. And like, we both have egos. We don't know what we're going to do yet. Like, luckily we get along and we have the same kind of sick imagination. So hopefully it won't be too bumpy.
Another thing about Donizetti is that he did double as a voice teacher, as a lot of the composers in this era and movement did. So they know a lot about the mechanics of the voice, and they know how to, again, bring out its best qualities. So, the composers of the bel canto era had a huge responsibility that really played into what really made that movement of opera and classical music fantastic. And something special about Donizetti is that he makes dissonance sound sexy. It's very strange, but only he and a couple of other composers I can think of can do it.
No, I get it totally. With writing, it's the same way. Like, how you really catch a reader's attention is by adding dissonant words together and just like your own kind of quirk, your own kind of voice. So I'm fully all for that. Dissonance, baby.
Oh yeah, the dissonance it adds a little extra like spice to a piece. And when I initially heard Amore e Morte, which is one of his art songs, and it was the first piece in Italian I ever learned, first real like classical piece of music I ever learned, and then first piece by him that I ever learned. So it was a really big deal. So when I heard that like uneasiness but still sounding beautiful at the same time, I was just like, whoa, that is just like the pinnacle of unusual beauty that I just fell in love with.
Hideous beauty.
Well, not really hideous beauty, more like just unusual beauty.
Yeah, True that. True that. Well, I think it just has to do with like most people do have that kind of draw to the unusual
Oh yeah.
because as much as we like to get in our own little rhythms, our own little routines, a break from the norm is always what we need.
And that's what made me fall in love with him.
Yes. I I,
He's
I go sorry.
he's very special. He's very, very special to me.
I have to look more into him. Like I have some knowledge of opera, but not as vast. It's so damn vast, just like anything like that, especially something like
Yeah,
influential.
absolutely. Like without him there wouldn't have been Verdi. Without him there wouldn't have been Puccini. Without him there wouldn't have been Berlioz. A lot of the like French romantic composers did take a lot of influence from him because he was like one of the most popular composers in Paris in the 1830s and the 1840s. So he was a big deal, but it breaks my heart that his memory is so diminished when he was so good, when he was such a big deal, you know?
Right.
It kills me.
It is unfortunate, but at least he had some success in his life when so many brilliant minds died poor and their work wasn't found till later.
Oh yeah.
That's the biggest tragedy. Like Lovecraft. He was probably decades in his grave before he had kind of any kind of following other than people who wanted to read Strange Tales magazines back in the 20s.
Mhm.
So hold on a sec. Lost my place in the questionnaire.
No, you're good. But yeah, so he really sparked my interest in actual opera, and he really like ignited the spark to get me into pursuing operatic voice, which was huge for me. So he was really, really, really special. And by the time I started taking voice lessons at 16, um, he still made such a firm imprint in my like impressionable years that I definitely wanted to incorporate as much of his works into my repertoire as I wanted or as I could that was within my range and capability to do so.
So you started with Italian first. That was the first foreign language opera
Yep,
you sang.
that
Nice.
was the very first language that you are absolutely required to start with whenever you are going into operatic training because the Italian will facilitate the proper support and technique and the pure vowels and the rolling of the R's that you will need in order to execute proper operatic technique. So, if anyone out there is interested in like shopping for voice teachers, if they're interested in like getting into it, and the first thing they tell you is, "Oh no, I'm not going to start you on the Italian repertoire," run the fuck away.
I'm guessing this happens.
Yes, there are some teachers that will just start you on like regular like English folk songs or English art songs or something, and I'm just like, "Dude, that is not gonna help you in the long run, not at all."
Wow. Yeah. Well, I know I just said it's good to break from convention, but sometimes it's not always the path to wisdom.
Yeah, not always. But definitely if you're pursuing opera, you're definitely going off the beaten path anyway, but you definitely wanna do it the right way.
Right. And you mentioned like bringing his influence to your own work, and it's such a common thing you see with creatives, whether it be writers or singers. They always start copying with their influences,
Mhm.
and when they start doing, they always think like, "Am I supposed to be doing it? Is it wrong?" No, that's what we all do. Like yeah, writers, we copy the people we read before us. Singers, same thing. Musicians, how do you start off playing other people's songs? You don't just start off playing your own stuff.
Nope, definitely not.
And yeah, you just keep building more influence, and either you come up with your own style or you just kind of augment off of somebody else's.
Yeah, what ended up happening, when I was composing, like, my own bare bones of Goddess in the Glass, before the wonderful producer that I ended up with for creating it, Tim Janssens, before he came into the picture, the bare bones of what I came up with was, piano, cello, and voice, as the bare bones for Goddess in a Glass, and what I, ended up turning out did definitely have some like influences of Donizetti, some dissonance and some really interesting like progressions and melodies and intervals and things like that. But then I ended up showing it to Tim Janssens for consideration, and he said that he himself loved it. He thought it was beautiful, and that musicians would love it, but the only problem is that it wasn't marketable. So that's why I ended up working with him in order to get Goddess in the Glass to the wonderful splendor that it is now. And he did take some bits and pieces of influence from what I had written from the bare bones to create what you hear now.
Yes. And yeah. Actually, thank you, by the way, for sending me a sample of that.
Of course.
I feel like a legit journo right out of the gate. But we're still on a baby bet, Adrienne, if I'm not mistaken.
A little bit.
So how many instruments do you play?
So my first instrument was the alto saxophone. That started when I was about 10 years old, and my dad essentially was obsessed with the alto saxophone, and he was just like, well, if you're going to be a musician, I want you to play what I want you to play.
Yeah.
And he had to kind of like strong arm his way into letting me audition with the alto saxophone instead of starting out on a clarinet or on a flute before working up to the alto saxophone. So there's that. And then later on, I started learning piano, and then later on cello, and then finally I settled on the voice. I can still play the cello. I can still like dick around a little bit on the piano, but due to lack of access to a keyboard, I'm definitely a little rusty and out of practice, but I can still read sheet music and plunk out my vocal parts on piano if I need to, if I'm learning a new piece or something.
Yeah, I was gonna say to like anybody out there who's like learning to play an instrument, there are certain levels you got to take up there.
Yes, there are.
Especially if you're doing like some orchestra stuff, definitely.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, would you say like learning the notes and sheet music made learning the multiple instruments easier?
Yes, it definitely made learning multiple instruments much, much easier because by the time I got to piano, I already learned how to read in treble clef, which is the right hand of what you're playing on a piano. However, I will say that I wasn't able to proficiently play bass clef on a piano until after I had some time of cello under my belt. Because
Nice.
that's primarily the clef that you read in when you play the cello.
I play guitar, but I can only read tablature. I can read some notes. I just never really applied myself to it because God, it just seems so insurmountable trying to comprehend it all. Because everyone always
Yeah.
told me, like, I guess I'm okay at playing guitar. I never tried writing too much of my own stuff.
Mhm.
But they always tell me, like, you learn piano and makes guitar a lot easier.
Yeah, I would say that piano is a really good instrument to start out on. If you are looking to be an aspiring musician, I think it really does not hurt to look into piano lessons, but that's just me.
Yeah, I had lazy teenage ADHD mind. She's like, no, just show me the tablatures. Whatever.
So did
I'll learn
I.
the rest. Yeah. Just show me this one Metallica song. I don't need to learn all that other note crap.
Yeah, no, not notes.
Yeah.
It's like that one
Notes.
part in Freaky Friday, just like, oh, you guys play notes?
Is that the remake or the original?
The remake.
Oh, the one with Jamie Lee Curtis. I didn't see that. I saw
Yeah.
the original one, like the one from the 70s.
The remake is pretty good, in my opinion, but that's just me.
I mean, it looked interesting. I just either I didn't see when it was out or just it has been presented in front of me. Otherwise,
Yeah.
I'm on something else. But all right, now we got music out of the way. When did literature come into the equation? I'm wondering.
Honestly, literature has pretty much always been there since I started showing the goth tendencies when I was a wee one. So around 9, 10, 11 years old, I was really getting into classic literature. I eventually drifted into the classic gothic literature. And because I was so precocious when it came to reading, I was definitely reading at a more advanced reading level than a lot of my peers at the time, especially by the time I hit like 5th or 6th grade. So the love for classic literature and gothic literature has pretty much always been there since my formative years.
Nice. I didn't get into reading until I was a little bit older, late teens, early 20s, because of
That's okay.
focused attention. No, it's fine. It's
Everyone goes at their own pace.
right. And I try to tell people that because they'll overstress themselves thinking they're trying to keep up everybody. Like the only person they got to compete with is the person they were yesterday.
Exactly.
But when I started getting into reading, I went into the oldies. When it comes to like Gothic literature, like Mary Shelley, Poe, Hawthorne, Dickens, and I'd say Lovecraft. He gets an honorable mention because of the short story "The Outsider." I don't know if you ever read that one.
It's been a really long time.
Yeah, and he's not the easiest to read for some people. But
Mhm.
I actually read that. It was one of the first stories I read, like when I was still a non-reader, and it was either a great one to read or probably not the best one to read for an angst-ridden teen with a loner complex. That's all I'm going to say. And oh, by the way, thanks for your recommendation. I'd read some Angela Carter shorts before, but I've never read The Bloody Chamber. And you recommended I went and got the collection, and yeah, that's pretty goth, yo.
It's pretty great, and I was kind of surprised that I hadn't come across it earlier in my research on Gothic literature, but I'm really glad that I eventually found it.
You read like Anne Rice stuff?
Really early in my teen years, but honestly, it really just didn't capture my attention as much as the classics did.
Right. I mean,
She's rather long-winded.
yes, she is, and when I think of goth literature, I can't think of modern prose. It takes somebody really special, modern prose, to
Yes.
get me hooked in. Otherwise, I'm looking at all the the trussed up. What do they call it? Chalky language in writer terms.
Yeah.
You got the Atticus flat, Hemingway stuff, and you got the dressy stuff. But yeah, that was a cool story, and here we go. Now, got the literature. When did Absinthe come into the equation?
Ooh. It's kind of weird now that I'm thinking back on it with these questions you're asking me. It's kind of making me think back on when all of this kind of like came to a head or when it started necessarily.
That's why I'm trying to fashion the questions.
But Absinthe kind of came into the picture for me when I was about 11 when I watched Bram Stoker's Dracula for the first time, and I was captivated by the absinthe scene, and I'm just like, absinthe, what is that? What is that? That looks so cool. I need to know what this is. And of course, I had to Google it, and I'm just like, by this time it was about 2005, so I was 11 years old, 2005, and that's when I found out that the ban still had not been lifted in the United States, but they were making progress. The ban had been lifted in Switzerland already, which is the birthplace of absinthe. And um, by that point, that's when I learned that it didn't cause hallucinations because, like, ever since I saw that scene in Bram Stoker's Dracula and heard it mentioned in passing or referenced in other movies or TV shows or something like that, people would always mention, "Oh yeah, it's that stuff that makes you trip balls, it makes you hallucinate." No. By that point, I already knew that it wasn't hallucinogenic or psychedelic or anything like that. So it was kind of like having a dirty little secret that no one else knew because everyone kept spreading the misinformation, and I still I knew the real story. Um, and then I had my first taste of it when I was almost 21. I was in New Orleans filming a pilot for a travel TV show at the time, and one of the people who we were staying with at the time did have absinthe in their household, and they're just like, "Hey, you want to try it?" And I'm like, "Fuck yeah, of course I do." And from that first taste, I was in love.
So, love at first sip.
Mhm.
Nice. It's funny you mentioned Bram Stoker's Dracula because that was the first time I ever heard Absinthe as well. But I saw it in theaters. I aged myself. I was 9 years old. It's what me, my parents, my brother, and they're drinking this. I'm looking, I'm like, what is that? Nothing you got to worry about. Watch the damn movie.
That's so funny.
Well, I definitely want to get to that whole pilot thing. I didn't know you were filming pilots for sure.
Yeah, I believe it's available on DVD, but I think there are conversations about it actually going onto mainstream TV within the next couple of years, but I'm still kind of waiting and seeing on that.
Oh, so can't talk about it.
Yeah, kind of.
All right, well, I'll just edit this shit out.
Okay, that's fine.
That's so cool though. You filmed a pilot, yo.
Yeah, I did. It was a lot of fun. Like that was my first time in New Orleans, and obviously, if you're going to be popping your absinthe cherry anywhere in the United States, it better be in New Orleans.
Was the name of the pilot Fox Force 5?
No.
Oh, Pulp Fiction reference. That's cool though. I mean, yeah, I heard I didn't try it till like, well, the first time I tried real absinthe was the one that, on Halloween, not last year, but the year before, the one that I showed you.
Right.
But other than that, I had it one other time, but it was the fake kind.
Of course, it was the fake kind.
Not to mention, I was already drunk as hell off a bunch of beer and tried drinking absinthe.
Yep, that'll do it.
I think I passed out around 7 p.m. and woke up at 9 a.m. the next day.
Yeah,
But
absinthe will definitely do that for you if you're already several drinks in.
well, I was like 22 and just even more stupid than I am now. When did you start your YouTube channel?
I actually started my YouTube channel when I was either 16 or 17 years old. And it's been a very slow, steady trickle of subscribers growing and growing ever since. First, I just kind of started following what other goth YouTubers were doing at the time. And then I kind of was doing a little bit of soul searching when I was in my like early 20s, and I'm like, you know what? No one on YouTube is talking about gothic literature. No one's talking very much about the music. No one's talking about absinthe. So why don't I talk about the holy trinity of things that I very much hold dear and start talking about absinthe and start talking about gothic literature and start talking about goth music, particularly like new goth bands. And that's how we got to this point where my channel is the way you see it now.
Yeah, I remember I met you through Angela.
Yes.
And I saw you had your own channel with your own content. Let's go like absinthe. Oh, she's album, books. Hell yeah, sub. Well, like you, I also like breaking from the norm in any part, any scene or whatever, because that's when it just starts growing stagnant. And with the goth community, by the time you're into it, I was already like really. I wasn't okay. How does this go? I was into it when I was younger, but like I also met a lot of gatekeepers, a lot
Oh,
of the
yes.
elitists.
Oh,
Like,
yes.
oh, you listen to metal music, you shouldn't be hanging around here. Oh, you smoke pot, you should be hanging around here. We don't like stoners around here. You can you can only smoke cloves around here. That kind of, it kind of turned me off. And like 3 people gave me the impression of the entire scene. I still listen to music. I just did it on my own.
Yeah.
It wasn't until eventually meeting like, Sarah, William, Philly Peroxide and all those cats, the real deal, the non-gatekeepers, like, okay, these people aren't stuck up assholes after all.
Nope.
Nice. But what
Yeah,
was
William's pretty awesome.
Yeah, they're all cool people and they've been really supportive of the shit I've been doing. Speaking of that, by the time you were into it, I wasn't into it. What was the goth scene like in like the early 2000s or whenever?
I would say by the end of the early 2000s was when it started diminishing into like the dark fashion show, where like there were some people who were in it just for the fashion and were in it to garner like the shock value and in it to get attention, that kind of thing. But then the other half were in it and they were very territorial and gatekeepy and oh, you like this band, you're not a real goth, or oh, you're not a Susie lookalike, you're not a real goth, or oh, you don't like Joy Division or Sisters of Mercy, you're not a real goth. I did run into a lot of those individuals online. But when I started a long distance relationship with this goth guy who was living in the Colorado area, a lot of his friends were kind of that like gatekeepy kind of mentality. And when I told them, oh yeah, I'm a goth and I also am studying to be an opera singer, they kind of looked down on me for that and told me that, oh, you're studying to be an opera singer. Oh, you're such a conformist and you're betraying the scene by training to be an opera singer. You should be learning to sing in post-punk style to preserve the subculture. And I'm just like, I was so taken aback by that. I'm just like, whoa.
I mean, how is that betraying the goth scene? How has opera never been
I
goth?
have no idea. Apparently they thought opera was mainstream, but I guess I missed the memo about that.
I've seen 2 operas before.
Okay.
one Italian, one Russian.
Okay.
To the point where like I was like like understand the lyrics as they were saying them. They had like one of those playbills and shit like that.
Mm-hmm. The super titles.
Yeah, there we go. One ended in a lot of death, and the other ended in suicide after a long, like, very sad story. If that's not goth, I don't know what the fuck goth is. Even like yeah, several years ago, I met all them and got back and got in the scene fully and started like interacting with people. I would run across people like that, like, oh, real punk is, I mean, sorry, real goth is only post punk, Sisters of Mercy, The
Yep.
Cure,
Yep.
Susie, yeah. And I would straight up lecture these people because I felt like I had the room to do so. I would y'all talk about like Interview with the Vampire and shit like that. What is the main message in that? Is you got to change, you got to move with the times, otherwise you just calcify and die.
Yep. We don't want that.
Yeah. Was it time changes? We do not.
Yeah.
But that's what it's about, and like you see musicians doing that nowadays, and I am all for it. And like I don't whether or not they wear the goth title is whether they embrace it or not, it gets thrown upon them, or like especially overseas, like even if they don't call themselves goth, they're still part of it because they are part of that culture in some way because it resonates with music. And I don't really see a point in just limiting that shit, putting borders on. Like, well, it's kind of goth, but it's not really goth. Like, why the fuck not?
Yeah.
I guess that's my rant. But the fact, like I said, you cover several topics instead of just one, which you see a lot of like in the goth scene. Just it's a big fashion show, shit like that, or videos on this is what makes you goth, and this is what makes you not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It shouldn't be that complicated, really.
But even the '90s for me, you kind of see that a little bit. Like they call people conformists, but they stick by a strict code. It's like the ultimate of ironies.
Oh yeah, it's absolutely ridiculous and very hypocritical to me, but that's just me.
And it's that irony, Louis, which kills us. So you had Absinthe at the younger age, so it's always been part of it too. So like, yeah.
Yeah,
Kinda
like
cool.
definitely the trifecta definitely sorry, I'm just picking up my Puyo over here. The trifecta definitely came into play for me around the same time. So like or maybe it's like a holy square, I guess. So you have the classical music, you have um the goth music, the gothic literature, and the absinthe. They all kind of just like came together when I was really, really young, around the same time.
And hold on a second. It like I was gonna ask something, and you already answered it. One of those deals.
Sorry.
No. That's what happens. So bringing all that into the goth scene, like, what has that journey been like? Is it like influence others to do the same? Has that generated some positive buzz in your direction from other people?
I definitely think it has generated a lot of positive buzz because everyone is like a lot of people who came to my channel, whether it be in regard to like opera stuff or finding the goth music that resonated with you and everything, and starting to educate people about absinthe. One of my favorite comments that I've gotten from one of my followers that I've ever gotten is that she said if I was just another old white guy, old middle-aged white guy or something, talking about absinthe on YouTube, she wouldn't have been interested. So I provided a little bit more diversity, so to speak, when it came to absinthe. So I was proud to be a little bit more representative of the women who were interested in absinthe and the absinthe scene and felt more encouraged to check it out, try it for the first time, fall in love with it like I did. But again, they said, if I was just another middle-aged white guy, they wouldn't have given it a second thought. So I'm glad that I stood out in a good way. That was always like that's always been a point of pride for me.
Well, you're being inclusive. People have their own journeys to walk. That's up to them. Like you can't control what they do, but Has Absinthe ever been? Does it clicky? Does it have its own like inclusive circles?
It can definitely be a little clicky among certain circles of the Absinthe community, depending on the type of personalities that you come into contact with. But thankfully, a lot of the prominent male figures in the Absinthe community have welcomed me with open arms. And I've always been super, super thankful for that. So, like, one of the first was Marcus Lyon of Lion Spirits, who has his own absinthe brand and everything. And he actually provided me with my first sample of pre-ban absinthe that I've ever had in my life. So that was really exciting. I don't think if it had not been for that connection that I would have been able to get my hands on that. So that was awesome. And then Jean-Philippe Doyon from Canada has his own absinthe brand, Joueur Vert and Fleur Bleu. So that's based in Canada, and wonderful absinthes made by traditional standards. And I've been very proud to help kind of bring more awareness to those brands. And then you have people like Ted Bro, who was the mastermind behind getting the absinthe ban lifted in the United States, who deeply respects the work that I do in educating people about absinthe and doing the extensive and comprehensive absinthe reviews and everything, who literally completed my collection of jades for free. He sent me full-size bottles of the rest of the jades that I did not have in my collection to review on my channel because he trusted my expertise, and he was confident in the quality of his product, and he respected what I had to say about it. That was incredible. Like, this guy is a fucking pioneer, and he's respecting my opinion. That was insane.
That is awesome.
Seriously, though, it is. This man is a fucking pioneer, and he was just like, oh yeah, this chick who reviews absinthe on YouTube, instead of just turning his nose up at it because I was a young woman, young woman of color who, by most standards, like, people wouldn't expect to be part of the absinthe community, but, I became part of it. Wow. And openly accepted among a lot of them. And then Brian Robinson of the Wormwood Society was also amazingly helpful and supportive of my journey to the top, so to speak. I'm not saying I'm at the top yet, but he's definitely been instrumental and I want to say like a little bit protective, which I appreciate.
Well, don't forget, what you see as the top right now just might be not even close to the top.
That's fair.
Keep on climbing.
Definitely fair.
So would you say this all came from your YouTube channel and all your content, like all these people reaching out to you?
Yeah, it was kind of crazy. Like, I did not expect that at all when I started doing these absinthe reviews. Like, I was paying for these bottles out of my own pocket and reviewing them on my channel and educating people about them and everything. And a couple years after starting to do that, that's when I started getting messages from distillery owners saying, hey, we would like to send you a free bottle of our product to review on your channel. And I'm like, whoa, no way.
Yes, please.
Like, I think it's safe to say that was probably like the first absinthe influencer, so to speak, if you can even call it that.
Why not? Here you go. I dub the absinthe influencer.
The first one.
Yes, the very first. We'll get the website working on that. But that is so fucking cool. So you have a seller yet, or you haven't gotten that much?
Not a seller. I definitely don't have enough to have a seller. I have a lot of sample sizes of absinthe that I have been sent over the years, but definitely not enough to have a seller. But I do have a bar that I built. Or rather, it was one of those ones that you buy from Target and then you assemble yourself.
hey, whatever works.
So that worked out really well, and it actually holds a lot of our other alcohols and boozes and mixers that we have too. So that's a lot of fun.
Well, until you get separate bars.
Yes,
you got the absinthe bar, and then you got the regular bar.
Yeah, when Kenny and I move into a bigger place, we are definitely planning on having a place that will have its own dining room so that one, he can have a tabletop space to do his like D&D and magic stuff, whenever he pleases. But I also want to have a space so that I can be like a successful and effective kind of bartender. So if I have people over that I'm entertaining, I would love to be able to have that space to make cocktails and prepare absinthe and everything. So that's a goal that we have when we cross that bridge.
I'm already picturing that shit right now. You have like two levels, like two level bars. Like at the bottom you got the regular bar with the pool table or whatever, maybe some darts. At the top you got the absinthe bar where you got like more like I don't know, artist canvases, maybe a big fluffy couch or something like that, somewhere to
Yeah,
ponder
a
for a
softer
while.
feminine Belle Book touch.
And maybe a library there for if you want to read while you're drinking.
Oh man, that would be nice.
Couple of laptops sitting up, you feel like writing. Bam, got the creative department.
Oh yeah. I mean, the goddess Artemisia Absinthium, she's the one that did all this. She's the one that inspires people.
Oh, there you go. Already know how you're gonna set up the decorations in there.
Oh yeah.
So you got the absinthe community coming at you from YouTube. Now, how did you link up with like musicians in the goth community?
So as I started featuring more like newer musicians that I started talking about and featuring on my channel as recommendations for my followers to go check out and follow and everything, that's when I started getting messages from artists and bands and everything is saying like, oh, hey, we have a new album coming out. Would you please feature us? We would really appreciate it. And that was another shock to me. I'm just like, wow, I'm just talking about bands. And all of a sudden these bands are reaching out to me so that they can be featured on my channel. That's crazy. So kind of a similar thing as to what happened in the Absinthe community. It turned into something that I didn't expect it to.
Any particular bands or artists that you like notable that really blew your mind?
Yes. So when I saw that Ashton Knight of The Awakening started following my content and
Hell yeah.
actively supporting what I did and sending me copies of his work was incredible to me. I didn't think that would happen in a million years, and I've loved this man's music since I was like 15 years old, so that was mind-blowing.
I'm also a fan of The Awakening, so that is really cool.
The Awakening is fucking fantastic. And then Dark Sanctuary, that's been another one. So I grew up loving Dark Sanctuary pretty much since I found them at age 12. And then onward was when they really made a significant impact in my life. And then, like many years later, like 15 plus years later, they're following me on Instagram and they're commenting on my own music saying that I have a lovely voice. And I'm just like, whoa, what? Who would have thunk? Like, how did this happen?
That's gotta be surreal though. Like people that like you're a fan of influence you or something, give you props on your own art though. It's like, Jesus.
Yeah, it was crazy. I never thought that would happen, but it did.
Well, that's really awesome. So with also, there have been misconceptions about absinthe. Is there anything you'd like to clear out right away for the normies out there?
The biggest misconception that I would like to clear up is that wormwood is not a hallucinogenic. It is not a psychedelic, nothing like that. There was one gentleman that Ted Bro actually told me about shortly before my interview with him that I think it was back in the late 90s or early 2000s. This numbskull read some information online saying that absinthe was a hallucinogenic, and this was before the science necessarily caught up with the misinformation at hand. And he bought a bottle of essential oil of wormwood, thinking that it was absinthe, and he ingested quite a bit of it and ended up having horrible convulsions and renal failure and ending up in the ICU for 17 days. And as Ted Bro said in the interview, do you think that person would repeat the experience? Do you think that he hallucinated while he was having massive convulsions and renal failure. Would he choose to do that again? No.
Yeah, that wasn't a smart move.
No, that's dumb. So that's why I get kind of fired up whenever people are so insistent on like believing the misconception, saying, "Oh yeah, absinthe is totally like a hallucinogenic. Oh, it's totally going to make you high. It's going to make you trip balls." It's because people will take that information and potentially do dangerous things with that information based on one stupid comment that some dude bro makes.
I would like to see how many cases of alcohol poisoning have been made because people were doing shots of absinthe like it was tequila or whiskey.
I mean, I'm sure there's probably plenty, especially in Eastern Europe, because that's where the crapsinthe thrives, and they bank on you believing that absinthe is going to make you trip balls and hallucinate if you have enough of it. And you get someone who doesn't know any better, and they think that this is the real thing, when in fact they're just suffering from something akin to alcohol poisoning, and they think, "Oh yeah, I totally tripped balls that night. It was great." And then they see like the genuine brands like Jade Liqueurs and Corn Opal and La Clandestine and Joie Vert and stuff like that. And they think, "Oh no, those aren't the real ones because, the real ones make you trip balls." Just based on a very misplaced and misleading and kind of a placebo of an experience.
What would you describe as the genuine absinthe experience?
The genuine absinthe experience is where you can sit in front of the glass and watch that beautiful alchemic transformation take place once water is added. You can see the little tendrils of cloudy absinthe dominating the glass. You can smell the perfume of all of the herbs and essential oils like dominating the air. You can feel that lucid drunkenness take over you when the intoxication hits. And there's nothing like it in the world.
I would agree. From someone that has drank absinthe, even the intoxication feeling is like different from like anything. Like
It's
my
so different.
my mind is used to going to weird places, so when it goes to a weirder place, not like I'm saying like super weird, but like off the regular path, it was like,
Off
whoa,
the beaten path, of course.
yeah. Even for me that tries to be a little more fluid with things, like wow, interesting.
It's an eye-opening experience. It just makes you feel like, I don't want to say it makes you feel like you're high, but it definitely has like a little bit of a floaty feeling. And that's one of the reasons why it was such a popular drink among the artists and bohemians and writers and musicians back in the pre-band era, was because it lowered your inhibitions enough to kind of like express your true feelings, but left you clear-headed enough to be able to manifest that into art or poetry or music. It's so beautiful. And it was also part of my family history, so I have a very deep connection with it. And it's also connected with a lot of the artists and musicians and writers from the pre-band era that I have fallen in love with. So it's just full. It has such a full, rich history and meaning for me.
Yeah. I can understand why some people might want to compare it to an hallucinogenic because for anybody who's ever taken a hallucinogen, it does lower you come on this vulnerable state of mind, and
Hmm.
it depends on the individual how they handle that. And you kind of just like feel those kind of armor slip away a little bit, and you're more bare in your consciousness. And I would say the feeling is akin to that, but without the colors flying around and making Pink Floyd's The Wall a lot more watchable. I mean, it's a good movie as it is, but
Oh
tripping
yeah, of
on
course.
definitely way better. I get why they do that, but also I believe like we can connect to something beyond ourselves through our consciousness, and through absinthe you can do that because that's what I kind of felt the night I drank it. It was actually Halloween night, 2021. The bottle you recommended for me, thank you.
Of course.
Yeah, and I feel like through that, the same way you would do for like psilocybin, you do kind of connect with that consciousness, and that's why I think it always influenced writers, musicians, and all that jazz, or painters, because you do feel inspired.
Like one of my favorite things to do is not only just to like study my sheet music while I'm having a glass of absinthe recreationally, But one thing I do love doing is listening to some of the works of the composers that lived in that era and that drank absinthe. And you can, like, as you feel the effects of the absinthe kind of taking hold of you, you can feel those intervals. Like, one of the things that really makes me think of absinthe is the piece Après le rêve, which is actually one of the pieces I sang for my audition on Friday evening. For me, like, before I even like approached it as a vocal piece to perform, I knew it as a cello piece, like a cello and piano kind of duet. And that um the initial intervals of the piano, or of the cello rather, the initial intervals of the cello just kind of like lifts you up and takes you elsewhere, and you get that similar feeling when the absinthe starts taking effect. So
It's
I love drawing that comparison.
it sounds to me like you were summoning that energy to you.
Yeah,
Like
kind of.
the energy of that era, like maybe you're trying to like, bring the spirit of it. Not exactly spirits, but the spirit of that time to
Yeah, I try to. I try to.
yeah, 'cause I know some people who do magic where they kind of do the same kind of summoning rituals, whether it be that kind of energy or the energy of a deity or whatever. Like, say for a writer, like they want to summon that energy of Hermes, the messenger
Mhm.
god, to help kind of bring out this message. But writers do the same thing too if they're like doing a period piece. Like with my graphic novel, it's set in World War I, and when I first started it, I had a bottle of Russian vodka I was drinking off of. Trying to get that listen. Well, I was listening to some German industrial too, because
Mhm.
it's Russia and Germany on both sides. So I was
Yeah.
kind of bringing my own mix into it while I was doing that. So I get what you're saying. You want to bring that energy to you while you're expressing it.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Like, I can definitely imagine that Gabriel Fauré was drinking a glass of absinthe at the time that he was writing A Puzzle Rêve, because the piece is very dreamlike and floaty and a little bit melancholy at the same time. It's just gorgeous.
I wasn't gonna say anything, but since you complimented me on it, my first live stream on YouTube, I kind of did this thing where I took the style of a George Carlin comedy
Oh,
bit.
yes.
Yeah, the Modern Man. Like it was really unrehearsed and stiff, but I kind of felt while I was writing it, like I can hear George's voice in my head saying it, and it would be something he would have wrote. Like a
Oh,
couple of them, I
yes.
think were pretty spot on. So it was like I felt like I kind of cut that energy a little bit when I was writing it out.
I really liked that. That was great.
I appreciate it. I like to think I've gotten better at talking since that first stream 2 months ago, or actually, no, it was a month ago. God, it feels like 2 months ago.
Kind of crazy.
But let's talk about Goddess in the Glass.
Okay. So, would you like me to talk about the inspiration for how it came about?
Tell me all of it.
Okay. So, one thing I have kind of despaired about is that absinthe has been consistently misrepresented. It's gotten better in the medium of film and TV within the last couple of years. However, the medium where it has not improved and has actually gotten worse progressively has been in music. So, I think it was around this time last year, I was sitting down and I was having a glass of this, which is the Jade Terminus Oxygené, my favorite absinthe ever. So beautiful. I just cannot get enough of this absinthe. It was just like being transported back to the pre-ban era. But anyway,
Hard to
um,
find.
not necessarily hard to find. It's not available in the US, unfortunately. You do have to order it online in order to get it, but it's so worth it. It is so, so, so worth it.
Cool.
So, I was drinking a glass of Jade Terminus Oxygené, and I was sitting back and thinking about how frustrated I was about music being a consistent form of media where absinthe was continuing to be misrepresented. And like a bolt of lightning, it just hit me. I need to write a song about absinthe, and I need to change it and end the vicious cycle, because it just keeps continuing and keeps happening again and again, and continuing to plant the wrong idea about absinthe in people's minds despite the decades of progress that we've made.
The universe spoke to you.
The universe spoke to me, or maybe the green goddess spoke to me. She was just like, "Hey, you need to write a song about me and tell people the truth about me." I'm not about all that. Tell them the truth. And that's what happened. So I sat down and I started writing out the lyrics for the song on my phone because that was the first thing that I wanted to keep it on and I didn't want to lose it. And I started writing out the lyrics and I looked at them again the next day and I'm like, okay, I don't hate this. Let me send this to my friend Whitney uh, and see what she thinks. She's another fellow musician, Whitney Tai. She also was the one who introduced me to the producer that I ended up working with. And that turned out to be a really, really good fit.
Awesome.
So
she's like your alpha reader for music lyrics.
Yeah, kind of.
Nice.
Yeah. So I asked her what she thought of it. She said she loved it. She thought it was beautiful. And then I started my conversations with Tim. I sent him the bare bones of what I composed initially for cello, voice, and piano. And he said that he loved it, but he could make it better. So it was also a really good partnership because we could both speak the same musical language. He was also classically trained and I was classically trained. So we could throw music terminologies at each other and we could be on the same page, literally. So that's another reason why it was a really good fit to work with Tim. And he, I said, oh, hey, I want this to be in 6/8 time signature because I love 6/8 time signature and it just feels really intoxicating to me, intoxicating like a glass of absinthe. And that's why you hear that rhythmic pattern in Goddess in the Glass, that in 6/8 time signature, the piano in the beginning that you hear. 6/8 time signature. There it is. She's already trying to lure you in.
That's awesome. Yeah, and awesome that you actually let me get to hear, before anybody else. This is like, part of a concept album, or it's just like a single, or
it's just a single, standalone single, along with the remix that I sent you as well.
Nice. Yeah, I mean, it's a mesmerizing song. It has this haunting, ethereal vibe to it, but it's also like alluring, like you said. And it just sounds like a really cool intro to a concept album about Absinthe. That was my thoughts while listening to it. And it definitely had this vibe to it, kind of reminded me of very goth, Tim Burton-esque almost.
Yeah, I actually had another one of my friends tell me the very same thing when I sent them a sample of it. He was just like, yeah, this is very like Tim Burton-esque a little bit. And I'm like, really? Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, like Danny Elfman could have scored it. That was my first. I'm like, this, yeah. It actually also kind of reminded me of like the credits of beginning of a movie.
Yeah, it's very cinematic, and that's definitely one of the things that I will always praise Tim Janssens for his compositional work. It is very cinematic.
Well, don't forget who gave him the bones to work with.
I know, but he made it better. He made it way better than I could have on my own.
Yeah, but
trust me on this. I never learned to compose. I never learned how to compose ever.
Nevertheless, he wouldn't have had anything without you.
Yeah, that's fair.
Sue, speaking of this, your audition. Would you care to speak of it?
Yeah, so I just auditioned for the Ladies Musical Club of Seattle 2 days ago. And this is just a bunch of ladies that like to get together and listen to classical musicians perform and, celebrate the work that they do, which I think is great. And I essentially wanted to audition for this organization was because I hadn't performed in front of people in 4 years up to that point. That's a really long time. The last time that I performed in front of people, it was in Seattle, and I was singing with a gothic metal band called Earn. 2 of the members since then have passed away from COVID.
Damn.
One of them I definitely considered a friend and a mentor, and he wasn't even 50 years old, and he was just gone like that. Very sad. But so yeah, that was the last time that I performed in front of people, and I really wanted to ease back into it. This came as a recommendation from my voice teacher, who was also a member of the Ladies Musical Club as a performing member. And I auditioned on Friday night, and I had my accompanist, who is the musical director of my friend Mark Ciano's show, Bohemia. and did a lot of the piano playing for that production as well. So he did a really good job. He's amazing. He was my accompanist Friday night. And even after just like one rehearsal with him together, like 2 weeks prior, you could tell that we were on the same page. We knew the vibe. We were just like a really good fit. And unfortunately, the audition did start out a little shaky because I was just like, oh God, it's happening.
I was going to ask you, what the hell was that like before you even got on the stage?
I will admit I did have to take some anti-anxiety medication to help with my nerves because I do tend to, like, the first thing that goes out the window when you're nervous is your breathing, and breathing is the most important part of singing.
Yep.
And so I'm just like, okay, if I take some anti-anxiety medication, I'll be okay. But I still had a little bit of like panic right as we were starting. But I eventually like got into the groove of it, and everything was smooth sailing after that. So it was just like the first couple of lines from the first piece that I sang, which was a Pas en rêve, and then the next piece I sang was Du Bist, which is a German art song. And then the third song I sang was an opera aria by Donizetti from his opera Roberto Devereux, and that one's called All'afflitto è dolce il pianto. So I definitely really like was feeling myself for the third one. Like, I feel like that was really an amazing accomplishment out of all three of them.
How many people were you singing in front of?
3. 4 if you count Kenny, but yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'm pretty sure he clapped the whole time. Anyway, 3, still, you know, anybody just getting on that stage, you know.
It's nerve-wracking.
Other than filling in the guitar spots here for like a metal band or a punk band, all that, or just getting on stage and screaming backups, I never really did that. And most of the time I wasn't sober. So,
yeah.
I do get that stage fright. Hell, even doing a live stream, I get it. But when it comes to go time, 9 times out of 10, I come out of the gates just like, fuck it. Just let go of inhibitions and just be myself. But how did it go?
So I don't know if I made it yet, unfortunately, because they're not going to tell me until a couple weeks from now whether I made it or not, because they have to discuss it with their board members who weren't even there, by the way. So I don't know how that's supposed to work, but that's okay. But I think I did really, really well under the circumstances, considering I haven't sung in front of anyone in 4 years, and considering that I've had a lot of negative experiences with performing in evaluated situations like that. But I think I walked out of that doing pretty fucking good.
How many other singers were you competing with?
I don't know exactly how many other singers I was necessarily competing with. It wasn't really like a competition situation. It was more like other musicians auditioning to be a part, like a performing member of this group. So I think we just had a solo pianist go on before me. And then me, who was a solo singer with someone accompanying me on piano, and that was it.
Well, sorry, I lost the screen for a second.
No, you're good. And then I'm sure there were probably like other instrumentalists and probably a couple of other singers that were there. But yeah, I was there as a solo singer.
When it comes to these processes for like, you know, auditions, do you think they're too stringent? Like maybe they should not be so stressful on the singer, or do you think that's good to just, you know, see if how they handle under pressure?
I think that they should try to be as warm and welcoming as they can, because it's already a stressful situation. And this was probably like the least stressful evaluated situation that I've ever been in, because every other situation I have been in, which was an evaluated situation in like a voice competition setting, it's stressful. Like a typical like competition setting is extremely stressful because there's a lot writing on it. Sometimes there's a possibility of like winning money if you get selected, but of course in competition settings I was never selected to win, and I think it's because I was just so goddamn nervous every time before I went on to sing. But this situation was definitely like the least stressful, but that doesn't mean that it was stress free.
Right. I can imagine. Well, actually, I can't imagine. I never tried it. But now we talked about going through the goth scene and the
Hmm.
perils there. Then it comes to the Absinthe crowd. Now, I absolutely know nothing about the opera scene and the people within it. When it comes to gatekeeping and cutthroat mentality, how bad is it, Adrienne?
Ooh. It really depends on the setting that you're auditioning for and that you're looking to get into. So I would say that one of the worst situations that I went into in a competition setting was that there was very blatant nepotism happening behind the scenes. So I was in the first round and I thought that I kicked ass and did a really good job. But everyone that came in from the Wenatchee district, which is a district that is adjoining to the Yakima Valley, which is where I'm from originally, everyone from that district was chosen to advance to the next level. Even someone who stopped in the middle of their song and said, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry. Let me start over."
Wow.
I was not chosen to go to the next level, but that person was.
And now this is in your region. I can't.
Yep, this was in Yakima
I don't even want to fathom what it's like in places like New York, Chicago, hell, even Paris.
or even Seattle.
Oh,
And it
oh.
was just a local like voice competition, but they called it the Fine Arts Festival. That was really, really, really upsetting. It made me feel like garbage. Like, talk about feeling like garbage. That made me feel like garbage. Um, yeah. Like, I felt like all the effort that I put into learning, memorizing, and polishing my song just went out the window. Just like it was totally worthless. And that's why I stopped doing voice competitions. I just had enough after that.
Yeah, that is really discouraging, but I think that's when you realize no matter how polished you are, no matter how hard you work, there's always gonna be something outside of your control that fucks shit up.
Exactly. That's exactly right. And even Kenny like leaned into me while one of the other or several other of the performers were singing. And he said, "I swear to God, babe, if I have to listen to one more basic blonde bitch one more time, I'm gonna kill myself."
Not realizing that everyone got quiet so they can hear him say that.
No, it was a good time to say that, so it was fine.
I mean,
Um,
ugh, I can't imagine what it's like doing all that.
yeah,
The only trying to comparison I'm put it to is the movie Black Swan, even though it's not dancing. But I can imagine getting that crazy in some circumstances.
yes, it can definitely get that crazy in some like evaluated, like stressful audition circumstances in the classical world. But you know, things are opening up in the opera world. It's really nice. You see opera singers in major productions in the Seattle Opera, excuse me, um, who have full sleeve tattoos that are visible. Like
Yeah,
the tenor who played Nemorino in Elisir d'Amore in at the Seattle Opera last year had a full visible tattoo sleeve,
really
and they didn't make him cover it up.
nice.
I
Well,
was thrilled beyond belief to see that.
I don't understand why they'd ever let them make them do that in the first place. It's opera. Who cares? Why wouldn't they have a
Yeah.
tattoo?
Yeah, and on top of that, like if you get someone like me who literally has an opera tattoo,
Yeah, no.
just like, oh, you don't care enough about opera to not get tattoos. I'm just like, really, bitch? You want to bet?
I bet. Um, that's why, like, yeah, the classical exists for a reason, but I think
Mhm.
it's mostly to learn from. But you know, with classical, you get old rules. Doesn't mean
Yeah,
you have
you
to
do
really
get old
adhere
rules.
by them. Yeah, they're good to learn from. Maybe hold guidelines. Maybe some should still hold true, like maybe the rudimentary of it all. But
Mhm.
there's something you let go of. And one thing is, well, for one, the clothing, personally. I mean, some of it looks really uncomfortable. And yeah, if you have tattoos, show it.
Yeah, celebrate it, you know? And you know who wouldn't give a shit if you had tattoos or piercings or if you, like wore something that was a little bit unconventional? Guess who wouldn't give a shit? The
Oh,
people who wrote it.
I would hope
They
not.
would just be happy that it's being performed. You know, it's just one of those things.
Makes you wonder what any of those cats would do if like you brought them to the future now and saw one of their like operas, like it's a big New York assembly.
Yeah, I have a feeling that if they were still seeing like l'Élysée d'Amore being performed, or La Favorite, or Lucia de Lammermoor, I think Donizetti would just still be thrilled that his music is still being performed 150 years after he died.
Yeah. Not looking at the stage like, Sacre bleu, look at the skin.
If
he does, kick his ass out.
And I'm really, really, really glad to see that opera companies and like classical organizations that do hold like auditions and competitions and stuff like that are not worshiping the basic blonde Disney princess sounding bitches that I competed against 10 years ago that always won everything. They're actually starting to celebrate the bigger, heavier voices like what I have.
You know? Why is it always going to be Disney? What's wrong with Studio Ghibli? That's personal opinion. I'll leave that out.
Oh, of course.
But yeah, screw the conventions. That's what I'm all about. And, you know, speaking of like you doing new things, how about Bohemia last weekend? Or was the weekend last?
It was the weekend before last.
All right, there we go.
Yeah, so that was amazing. So it was already a busy day at work, kind of stressful. For those of you who don't know, I work as a phlebotomist in my day job. So I'm a professional vampire. I'm the nice lady that comes in and stabs you when you need to get your blood taken.
Yes.
That's me. That's what I do. And I get paid for it. And it's a really nice job. I love it. It's my favorite job ever that I've ever had. So stressful day at the hospital, really stupid, weird day. Like, I'm just thinking, God, I'm having a weird day. What the hell is going on here? And then I get a text from my friend Mark Ciano, who is one of the creators and the producer of Bohemia. And the whole thing with Bohemia is that it tells a story of the composer Dvorak struggling to find inspiration to compose his Ninth Symphony, which will come to be known as the Symphony of the New World. And it was a big hit at the time that it came out. And my friend Mark plays Dvorak, and it's a lot of fun. And so he searches for inspiration in the bottom of a bottle of absinthe and is visited by the ghost of Chopin and some green fairies. And they help him find inspiration. So it's a little bit of comedy, a little bit of cabaret, lots of classical music there. There's even a striptease to Claire de Lune, of all pieces to have a striptease to. It's so different, but it's amazing.
Awesome.
So
this was a one night?
So it runs for like 2 weekends a year, and then it's gone, and then it comes back the following year. So it was 2 shows per night for like 2 weekends.
So you did all of them?
So I did the Saturday and Sunday shows for the last weekend that they were doing Bohemia. I really wanted to come in and do the Friday show, but unfortunately, I just could not get away from work because it was crazy day.
I get that.
Yeah, but Mark messaged me and he said, listen, I need you. One of my absinthe serving fairies for intermission called out. I will pay you this much money if you can do this. You know, can you help me out? And I'm like, okay. Like, I jumped out of my seat and I called Kenny and I'm like, hey, Mark needs me in Seattle to help with Bohemia. This is how much he's going to pay me. Are you cool with this? And he's just like, yeah, okay, let's do it. So then I scramble over and I talk to my manager and I tell her what's happening. And I said, okay, this is an emergency situation. He would not summon me all the way down from Whidbey Island to Seattle if he didn't need me. And she was able to get everything to work for me, which was amazing. And then by Saturday afternoon, I made it to Seattle and I started getting ready for Bohemia. And I was educating the patrons on different brands of absinthe to try and made recommendations. And then during intermission, I was the one doing the fountain service for them. And that was a lot of fun.
So like, yeah, the experience altogether is fun times.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was so fun. Like, it was really weird because, like, a lot of the cast members and the musicians and everyone was flirting with me. Oh my god, it was so weird. Like, everyone was pouncing on me. It was very strange.
The absinthe was flowing that night.
I guess it was. It was crazy.
All right, so with the audition and with being a fairy, how do you feel now about getting back on the stage and performing?
I feel pretty fucking great about it, honestly. Like, I'm
yeah.
so excited for my next audition, which is going to be for the Puget Sound Concert Opera. And that audition will dictate whether Kenny and I pick up and move to, like, closer to Seattle so that we can be closer to the action, so to speak.
And when is this happening?
I'm thinking sometime in April or May. So that'll be interesting.
Do you have anything else lined up that you can at least discuss for right now? Like anything recording, any other projects?
I have a friend that I'm going to be doing another song collaboration with, and then later on a music video. So that'll be fun. And it'll be a goth project, not like classical or anything like that. So it'll be really, really interesting and a lot of fun. Like it'll be great.
I should really introduce you to my metal friends. I would like to hear some Nightwish stuff with your kind of voice, personally.
I can definitely do Nightwish stuff with my voice.
You do hear some of that kind of like, symphonic operatic metal. Personally, I think a few bands do it great, and the rest just rip off those bands.
Yeah, I agree.
I'm not going to say names, but it's definitely not Nightwish. They rock.
Yeah. What's really irritating to me, like as far as people trying to like, they think they're being helpful, but a lot of the times it can come across as really annoying and sometimes even patronizing and sometimes even like dismissive of what you're pursuing. But a lot of people around me, like in my local life here on Whidbey Island, they're just like, oh, well, you're a singer. You should try out for the Whidbey Playhouse and do stuff for them. Like, that would be great. And I'm like, would you ask Elena Garancha to audition for stuff in the local Whidbey Playhouse if she was in a dead end? Do you think if the Playhouse, like the local Playhouse, would be an option for me? Or that I'd be thinking of it as an option for me if I'm already down in Seattle doing auditions?
No, but I think you gotta remember they also live in a smaller world. They never heard of any of these people. And if
That's
they
fair.
would, they would probably be like, holy crap, yes, you're doing the right thing.
Yeah, it's just really, really frustrating. They're just like, oh, well, you can be in like Greece and Chicago, and that'd be a lot of fun. And I'm like, I've been doing classical training for 12 years. What makes you think that my voice is going to be anything close to what they're going to find acceptable?
Right. Well, from somebody who likes breaking away from convention, and also as a writer, I like kind of challenging myself a little bit. And there's actually this movement out of France. It's in poetry. I'm trying to remember the name of it. God, getting tired and old at the same time. Well, I'm looking it up right now, but I had it. Yeah, Oulipo movement.
Existentialist?
The Oulipo movement. It's for like, writers and mathematicians. They do this like constrained writing techniques. One
Oh,
is
okay.
this novel by what's his name? It's called Avoid. It's by this guy Perec, where he
Okay.
omits the entire letter E throughout the entire novel.
Hmm.
I mean, it's in French, but still, same thing. The most commonly used letter, and just like stuff like that. Now, when it comes to like experimenting with different music, I never try to tell anybody what to do, ever. But
Which I
if you,
appreciate.
if you ever want to challenge yourself one day, even by yourself with karaoke, try singing a few Grease songs, or not even Grease for that matter. Like any like something you would never ever do, a different style.
Again, the thing is, when you train your voice to sing a certain way for 12 years, it's really hard to do anything else. For example, my dear, dear husband in the next room will say something to the effect of, babe, I love you, but when you sing in English, it just doesn't sound right. If Mr. I'm no musician can tell me that with a straight face and not be bullshitting me, then what makes you think that someone at the Whidbey Playhouse is going to be okay with my heavy ass singing voice singing in English?
it also depends on your melody and what style it can be used towards. Like even the worst sounding English voice can be used for industrial.
Yeah, that's fair.
Sorry, I had to reach for that one. But I don't know. What do you say is like your strongest language voice, if that's such a thing?
My strongest language voices are probably going to be floating somewhere between Italian and French.
Yeah, I was actually going to ask you one to sing something, but yeah, that's too on the spot.
It's a little bit too on the spot. This microphone is probably not going to be able to handle it. So yeah.
And as much as I know you hate stereotypes, I have to ask this: have you ever broken glass with your voice?
When I was younger, yes.
Really? Like, what'd you
Yes.
break?
Wine glass.
Oh, so was there any wine in it?
No.
Oh, well, it's still cool
That
though.
tends to work better when the glass is empty.
Oh, right. But still, that's really awesome. You know, like I've never seen that in person, but like I know it exists. But cool. So I was wondering, for where can anybody find you? Like all over social media.
So they can find me at Adrienne LaVey on Instagram. They can find me at that same handle on Twitter, as well as on my YouTube channel. I did undergo a username change from Ligeia Resurrected to Adrienne LaVey, so that it'd be a little bit more recognizable and people aren't struggling to find me and people aren't struggling to like find my social media handle and everything like that when it differs from my stage name, that sort of thing. So yeah, if you just type in Adrienne LaVey, then you'll be able to find me.
Cool. And it was great talking to you, and you know, thank you so much for being my first interview.
Oh,
And,
of course.
it was great to get like I've known you for a while, but it was great to know more about you and your journey here. And like, I'm glad to see you make it to where you made it. I'm happy for you. I'm proud, and I can't wait to see what you do next.
Well, thank you so much, and thank you so much for having me. I feel very special being your first interview.
No problem. And like from somebody that comes from different scenes, I like to try to bring in new people and introducing them to things they never would have seen otherwise.
Of course, that's what I'm all about too.
Hell yes, that's what the true pioneers do, I believe.
Oh yeah.
But for everyone out there, thank you for listening. This is my first interview. Hope maybe there'll be many afterwards. We'll see how everyone reacts to this one first. But y'all be easy. Stay hydrated. I'll talk to you later.